Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Saturday to you, and welcome to this video. I am a meteorologist in the Raleigh area. I've been doing meteorology for about 20 years professionally on YouTube since December, and I just want to welcome you to my channel. We're going to talk about a few tropical systems which are going to be impacting land here in the next few days, and the potential for a couple of them to rapidly intensify as the waters of the ocean remain above average. We're in the peak of our tropic season here, and busy weather continues. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to talk mostly about the two systems of greatest concern in the Atlantic. Then we're going to shift over to the Pacific and talk about some storms that direction as well. We do have one named storm that is on the map, Tropical Storm Franklin. That is the one I think has the best chance of rapidly intensifying into a major hurricane and threatening Bermuda somewhat here in the next few days. Behind that, the next storm on the list is Idalia. That is now an investigation area 93L near the Yucatan Peninsula that will likely develop into our next named storm early next week. And that has its eyes on Florida here for Wednesday, and then potentially the Carolinas and Georgia after that. Moving out in time for the holiday Labor Day weekend. Say holiday weekend, I know it's not really a holiday, but an observance. So here's a look at our current map of areas to watch. And this is Tropical Storm Franklin beginning to intensify, likely to become a hurricane before tomorrow. Here's our next area that has a 90% chance of developing in the next week, 60% in the next 2 days. So more than likely by Monday, we will have our next depression or storm. Idalia's on the list. Behind that, we've got an investigation area that we're still watching that could become a depression, although the chances are not great until Franklin moves out of the way here later next week. And then a new wave, it will be moving off the Atlantic coast, and that could develop here later next week into our J storm. Well, one of these will be the J storm. One could be the K storm, but probably J. One of the two, I think, will develop. Here's a look at the wide angle view here, and I'm going to pull up my pen and show you all the features on the map that we need to be watching. This is Tropical Storm Franklin, finally beginning to show some signs of development here. This is our next disturbance, 93L in the northwestern Caribbean over very warm waters. That is starting to develop as well. This is the remains of what was once a brief tropical storm, Gert, still out there and still affecting land, but being sheared by Franklin. Here is the Invest 92L that we've been watching, but I do not see development from. And then in the Eastern Pacific, we're no longer looking at a likelihood of something developing here near the Riviera. Too much wind shear. The area that I think could develop is going to be well out to sea and not going to cause any problems. Stateside, we still have what we call a death ridge, a huge area of high pressure here over the south. Storms traveling up and over that ridge. Today, they'll be tracking through Kentucky, Tennessee, and into the Carolinas. We're also going to see an upper level feature right here, kind of a trough here that's going to dig southward, and that's going to entice this next system to turn north. The steering flow will allow it to pull north and northeasterly towards Florida here in the next couple of days. The rest of the Caribbean is quiet. We have another ridge of high pressure here, and that is not exactly helping tropical development, but it's not really hurting it either. And then in the Northeast and in the Great Lakes, we're enjoying a little bit of a taste of fall here the next couple of days with a pretty decent sized trough here. And that is going to keep Franklin from turning westward. That trough will actually turn it more away in this direction. And that curve looks like it's going to be more severe than it did a couple of days ago, which is something that I think would be encouraging for those of you here watching in Eastern Canada. This storm system, which originally was shown to be come up here towards Newfoundland, now showing more of a turn towards Bermuda and perhaps well to the south of Newfoundland. So we're going to talk about that here in the next couple of slides. Here is a look as well at the Pacific. We've got a few systems that I do have my eye on because land will be impacted. This, not as severe a system, Damre, I think it is, but will be coming close to eastern Japan as a typhoon over the weekend. Probably not going to be a big deal, at least considering the storms that Japan has already had. But this one down here will be. This is strengthening, very strong Typhoon Saola, and Goring, I think, is a Philippine name, and that is making a counterclockwise loop and likely to strengthen, and a major threat to Taiwan as a severe typhoon, probably a Category 4, maybe even briefly a Category 5 here in the Philippine Sea. So I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. In the Pacific, less likely we're going to see anything develop near the Mexican coast and come up towards California. That's not going to repeat last week. There will potentially, though, be a storm system out in the open waters that we're not going to have to worry about. Here is the reason why we're seeing rapid intensification in the Atlantic. We are finally starting to see some relaxing of wind shear. The waters have been very warm, almost record levels in the last month. across the Eastern Gulf, across the Western Caribbean, and the Southwest Atlantic. That doesn't necessarily mean strong hurricanes, but it does mean there's more fuel for a storm, which once it loses some wind shear can develop quickly. And you'll see the area of the Eastern Gulf is the area I want to highlight here. Once we do have some development, we've got water temperatures running 3 to 4 degrees Celsius above average. So once the system comes into here, if the wind shear relaxes, it can strengthen very quickly. And this is why I put out forecasts for Florida more than a week in advance, because it's not going to take a lot. Once we get the wind shear to weaken, once something comes up into here, it can very quickly intensify. However, the area that has the best chance of development for the time being is this region between the Bahamas and Bermuda. As Franklin moves over this area of warm water in here, it could very quickly intensify, and that will have some bearing on the weather here in Bermuda over the next couple of days. So I'm going to break that down for you guys in a little bit. Here's our chance of having tropical storms. This chance up here is probably diminished at this point, but you see Franklin on the map here, likely going to have tropical storm conditions very close to Bermuda. That's a small little dot right here. And then you'll see in the Eastern Gulf, we have a decent chance, 80% of at least a tropical storm moving towards the Big Bend area of Florida here on Wednesday. And then that will continue up the southeast coast, maybe impacting the Carolinas and Georgia between Wednesday night and Thursday night, while Franklin is now tracking towards Atlantic Canada. But notice the chances for Newfoundland are not very big of tropical storm conditions. That chance has actually gone down here in the last couple of days. Here is today's run, and if I take you back to yesterday's run, you'll see the chance was a lot higher yesterday to see tropical storm conditions in Newfoundland, whereas today that chance has dropped significantly. And the reason why is our storm is slower and it's taking more of a hard right, as a trough in the eastern United States will be a little slower to arrive, but once it does arrive, give it more of a kick out to sea. So better news here for Newfoundland, according to our ensembles. But keep an eye here off of the Carolina coast. We still could have something in the picture between the Carolinas and even Bermuda again as we get into next weekend. So Bermuda may not be done after Franklin. We could see Idalia after that. The good news here is that the rest of the Atlantic does not see a very high chance of development. I will show you tropical depression possibilities from this next wave coming through the Cape Verdes here later next week, Thursday into Friday, but not really tropical storm chances at that point. I'm not super worried about this area in here. There could be some gusty winds, but I'm not really seeing development. Even 92L over here and the remains of GERT, just the chances for those either to be a depression or just not super high. But we could have yet another area of interest coming off of Africa around Labor Day that we'll be watching, but that's still pretty far off. Of course, some of these Cape Verde storms this time of the year don't look like they're going to be a threat for a while, and then give it a week or two, and then we do have something to talk about. So more on that in the coming days. Here's a look at the ensembles from the European, and I'm going to set this in motion very easily. You can see Franklin. Very likely we have a depression or a low-end tropical storm here on Monday entering the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. 92L not looking like it'll develop. GERT not looking like it'll develop. Emily not looking like it'll redevelop. And then really, it's just 3 systems on the map to be super concerned with. Franklin here as a hurricane, potentially Idalia as a tropical storm or low-end hurricane, maybe a depression here later next week, and then likely our next system, Jose, over here in the eastern Atlantic towards next Thursday and Friday. So we are going to obviously have a lot to track. I don't want you to get too caught up in spaghetti. Remember, any one of these ensembles could be correct, and you see that spread is over 1,000 miles here with Franklin. You see that spread is over 400 miles here with potentially Idalia, and over 1,000 miles here with potentially Jose, and then maybe some other systems that are trackable at least on our models. So that's what I'm going to be watching for you. Let's take a closer look at what's going to be steering our storms here over the next couple of days. And let me pull the pen back out. And it hides from me. You guys can't see it, but it hides for me. And here is our circulation center now, 93L. And you can see thunderstorm activity is looking pretty healthy. Now, we do have an upper level low over here in eastern parts of Mexico, and that is continuing to back away to the west. And that is giving us an avenue to see this system move northward. Now, there is a bit of a monsoon trough up in here. There's some wind shear up in here, and that's what's keeping this system from developing too quickly. The other thing we have to be concerned with is the proximity to land here over the northeastern Yucatan. Obviously, tropical systems take longer to form when they're halfway over land. Meanwhile, we also have some wind shear coming through the northern Caribbean and wrapping into the circulation center of Franklin here. But you will see Franklin, which has been struggling the last couple of days with westerly wind shear, looks like that it's finally starting to let go of that shear as the shear weakens some. It's still here, but it's starting to back off, and that's allowing for more outflow here. We no longer have that convection choked off on the western side of the center. So we've got a system that looks like it's in a good spot to strengthen here as it moves north-northwest and then eventually turns northward and eventually becomes potentially an issue here for Bermuda. So I'm going to talk about that one first, and then we'll come back to our system here in the Gulf. Here's Franklin, and you can see on the center of the storm, we still are missing some convection, but we are starting to see it wrap in here, almost a mini eye wall, if you want to call it that, as wind shear relaxes. And as the day wears on, I expect to see this area here filling in, and we get more of what's called a central dense overcast. Once that happens, waters are warm and wind shear is lessening, then I think we're looking at rapid intensification, potentially into our first major hurricane of the season early next week, Monday into Tuesday. And that could affect things in Bermuda here. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Let me get my pen off the map here. I did the vanishing pen earlier, and now it's permanent. So my bad here. But you can see here the National Hurricane Center turning our system to the northwest and strengthening it into a hurricane tonight or early in the day tomorrow. Now we've got a forecast point west of Bermuda here on Tuesday morning of a major Category 3 hurricane. There is some chance it could still be stronger than this, but I think Category 3 is a decent forecast at this point, although I would not be shocked if we even had a Category 4, and if that happens sooner here on Monday. You will see that the latest track of the system has curved more sharply to the right. It takes Nova Scotia out of even the northwestern edge of this. And if you extrapolate this, it will actually probably take the Avalon Peninsula of Newfoundland out of it. You'll also notice that the track is a little bit slower here in the next 3 to 4 days due to the slower arrival of our trough. And what that means is Bermuda, instead of seeing the worst weather on Monday night, may now see it on Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday night. So I'm going to zoom in on that and show you. It also means if there are impacts on Newfoundland, that rather than those happening on Thursday, they may not be till Thursday night or even early on Friday. So that's what I'll be watching for you here. Here's our chances for tropical storm winds. And you'll see Bermuda is in that 50 to 60% chance right now. So we will likely have a tropical storm watch issued tomorrow. And it is certainly looking likely that a tropical storm warning would follow that. And a hurricane watch could be issued if there's any shift to the east. Now, this is good news, of course, for the eastern seaboard. It takes us out of that risk for tropical storm force wind. That chance is very low across Atlantic Canada, but it is there. Once we look at 50 knot, which is 60 or 58 mile per hour winds, we see that Canada avoids those. Even I think the Avalon Peninsula, but Bermuda is kind of in a 20% chance of seeing those stronger tropical storm winds. And then the hurricane wind chances are highest to the west of Bermuda. Right now, just 5 to 10% chance. But if this shifts eastward, you see these yellows here at 30%. If it shifts eastward by even 200 miles or 100 miles, then that brings that chance for hurricane force winds up for Bermuda, and of course lowers them for Atlantic Canada. So that's what I'll be watching for you. Models are in great agreement here, and now they all keep everything just to the south and east of the Avalon Peninsula of Newfoundland, where I guess most people in Newfoundland live. I guess St. John's is there, but there's still a few models that are close enough to cause some potential issues. That time frame is going to be Thursday night. You can also see here rapid intensification models. This is tough to see, but because it's in yellow. But there's two rapid intensification models that form a slope like this, which would bring it up to Category 3 strength here in about 72 hours. This is from 2 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday. 72 hours is 3 days. That would be 2 a.m. on Tuesday morning when winds could be at their strongest. And there are a few models in here, about 4 of them actually, that make this a Category 4 here as soon as Monday night, early Tuesday morning. The more conservative models, which don't show that, still have a Category 2 or 3 here Monday night into Tuesday, and then some weakening starting on Wednesday. So I really do think we are going to have our first major hurricane of the season with rapid intensification. The tropical models say there will be some strengthening here today and tonight, and we will likely have a hurricane tomorrow morning. And as we get to tomorrow night, pressures drop down into the 960s. And as we go beyond that into Monday, pressures drop into the 950s and even into the 940s, which is Category 3 intensity here on Monday afternoon. 930s possible according to this. And that may be a little aggressive, but it is certainly still possible. On this map, you can see Bermuda here. right over here, and you can see the storm is about 250 miles west of Bermuda, kind of heading in this direction, but they may get clipped with tropical storm conditions here. I need to move on and show you winds because we're going to talk about the Gulf system here in just a bit. I know a lot of you are watching for that, but you can see winds strengthening here with speeds over 100 miles per hour by Monday morning and over 120 miles per hour Monday afternoon. And by Monday night, the HAFS says Category 4 strength with wind speeds over 140 miles per hour. And strongest winds Monday night, and then some gradual weakening after that. But look how the storm starts getting closer and closer to Bermuda. It's not bringing hurricane conditions onto the island, but it is getting closer and certainly leading to rough surf with those southerly winds pushing that surge right up into Bermuda. So if this tracks any further east, we will see more significant impacts on the island of Bermuda. And then this storm will slowly weaken as it moves into cooler waters north of Bermuda and passes by Atlantic Canada. But on the European, we no longer see hurricane force winds potentially over Newfoundland. In fact, if you look at the European, it turns things to the right very quickly here. For the island of Bermuda, it's got 40 knot wind gusts possible here, and potentially 47 mile per hour winds over Bermuda, according to this track. And oh, by the way, the next system could bring tropical storm conditions up the east coast here of South Carolina and North Carolina before the weekend, probably on Thursday. So better news for Canada at this point, worse news for Bermuda. The rest of the central Atlantic, pretty quiet. Here's the remains of Gert. Here's the remains of Emily are off the map. Here's 92L, and then nothing really behind that. And then in the eastern Atlantic, a massive wave here is the next one that looks like it's going to develop as we get later into the week. And I'm covering ads because they're a little annoying. I do love tropical tidbits. Dr. Levi Cowan is a wonderful meteorologist. He does a daily video when tropics are a threat, and I encourage you to listen to his videos. They're very technical, but he goes into a lot of what's behind the forecast. All right, we're going to talk about Florida and potentially Idalia here, and we're going to spend most of the rest of the video on that. And a lot to talk about today, so forgive me for going about half an hour here, but you can see thunderstorms have flared up very, very well here over the western tip of Cuba and right here over the Yucatan Channel where waters are at their warmest. Here's a zoomed in view. And while we don't have a well-defined circulation center, at least at this point, we do have the thunderstorm activity in the place it needs to be to see that kind of development. Now, we do see there is some wind shear up here to the north. You can see here some southwesterly shear and then kind of a westerly wind shear. And there's some proximity to land, but I mean, I would not be shocked if this system tried to wrap up into a depression here by tonight or early on Sunday before the models really indicate that would happen. We just need this to persist through the daytime hours. You can see the wind shear is not super strong and waters are warm enough. So we just need to see a circulation center somewhere in here before we could see a depression. And that very well could happen now. And if it does happen now, then our system will be a tropical storm when it enters the Gulf of Mexico, in my opinion. You can see, though, the next 48 hours show very weak steering, and the system's not going to budge a whole lot until Monday morning. It's going to be kind of right here in the Yucatan Channel for 48 hours, then acceleration to the north as it gets picked up by a digging trough. And that will speed things up more quickly towards Florida. And it does look like Florida's going to get hit. The question mark is where in Florida. We are seeing the average of the models taking it towards the Big Bend. We've seen some global models that are targeting the Forgotten Coast, even a couple of models that are showing the Gulf Coast here, Panama City over to Destin. Those are kind of on the western end of our possibilities. And just a couple more models say that there's enough of a bend that brings Tampa into potentially the right front quadrant of the strongest winds and storms. Now, this model guidance has shifted west. The European is still east. It goes up into this direction, but then recurves faster. The other models say it's going to go through Georgia into South Carolina and North Carolina and bring some heavy rain northward here later in the week. It's still too soon to make the call until this storm develops, so this will likely change some more. But right now, this is where the models are trending, and this is what I wanted to share with you. So we are looking at some intensification and possibly a tropical storm in as soon as 24 hours. More likely, though, in 48 to 60 hours, which would be Monday morning to Monday afternoon. And the storm, that the faster it goes, obviously, the better chance it has of becoming a hurricane. I am predicting a borderline Category 1 hurricane, but I could see how this remained a tropical storm. However, when we get to storms that are forming in this part of the world this time of the year, this intensity forecast can very well suck. We could very well have a rapidly intensifying hurricane that makes its move kind of like we saw with Michael, kind of like we saw with Ian, Do I think that's going to happen here? I really hope not, and I don't really see it happening. My gut says no, but is that possible? I would say on the high end of things, certainly it is. But we're not going to be looking at a storm that's going to be strengthening very quickly out of the gate. It's going to take a couple of days. So that is the good news in seeing that. In fact, that's what we want to see in Florida. We want to see the rain here because we need that. So here's a look at the European global model. And you can see it's got a low-end tropical storm Tuesday morning in the Eastern Gulf, then that strengthening. And it's going to take really a day to strengthen before it makes landfall towards the Big Bend here on Wednesday morning. This would be a higher end tropical storm, maybe 60 miles per hour. And you can see the pressure is actually dropping as the wind shear lessens more and more. So our storm, while it may not strengthen, it's definitely not going to weaken at this rate as it tracks towards Jacksonville Wednesday afternoon, and then up the low country and up the coastline here of South Carolina Wednesday night, and then Thursday morning. The European is the hardest to the right here, but it's also led the charge on that. Another thing I want to show you guys is once Franklin moves out, we do have a new ridge of high pressure that builds in, and the European could stall near or just to the west of Bermuda as that ridge builds. So a ton of dry air is coming down into the southeast for Labor Day weekend. Actually, it should be a very nice weekend next weekend in the mid-Atlantic and southeast to a point. That dry air is going to get in here, and that's going to keep our system from strengthening. But this area of high pressure is blocking things off and keeping Idalia from leaving the area. It's got it hanging around a little bit too long. And once the next ridge builds in, then if this is still hanging out, we still need to be watching it, unfortunately, after Labor Day. The other models don't show that, though. They show our system here coming into the Big Bend. This is a Canadian Tuesday night, so it's a little bit faster, meaning it's not going to be able to strengthen as quickly. And then it's already off the East Coast here Wednesday around lunchtime, and then moving away quickly and tracking very close to Bermuda here next Friday. GFS leaves a trough behind and says there may still be some action here in the Northern Gulf over Labor Day weekend, and something that we might have to watch. But here's that dry air coming down. So Labor Day looks absolutely beautiful in the southeast, except for South Florida and except for Louisiana and Texas, which I think actually would be pretty excited to hear that some moisture is moving in for Labor Day weekend. It may ruin your outdoor plans, but it's not going to be 110 degrees with wildfires in Louisiana next Monday. At least we don't hope. We hope it won't be. Finally, the GFS model, the last one to the party here. The GFS has this bias where it takes this system west of everyone else. This model run says it'll be a tropical storm hitting near Apalachicola and the Forgotten Coast, but I've seen model runs before go stronger and farther to the west. So it's starting to correct over to the right with each run. We'll see if this trend continues. Yesterday was the first run that made it a hurricane. It had it hitting just west of Panama City. The evening run was weaker, but still a hurricane coming through Apalachicola. The overnight run back to the west, Category 1 hurricane hitting near Destin. And now the 6C run is saying it's a tropical storm hitting the Forgotten Coast. So GFS is dancing around, but it's farther west than the other models. And if you're in Florida, you have seen this before, and it is frustrating. But I'm going to stick to my guns on this one and say the Big Bend area and maybe the Northern Peninsula have our best chance at seeing development. Here's the HAFS tropical model. It dances around here with the Yucatan until Monday afternoon, and then it starts to show some strengthening here on Tuesday morning. This is the Eastern Gulf. You don't see land in queue here. And then it is analyzing this low pressure all the way up here, but you can see that circulation center is actually down in here as a tropical storm with about 60 mile per hour wind Tuesday evening, and then brings landfall actually up to about Apalachicola here late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning. So it could be a little bit quicker here. And the faster it moves, the less likely it strengthens. But you can see 985 millibars, winds will be at high-end tropical storm force at that point. And then that low moves across southern and central Georgia during the day Wednesday, and then towards eastern Carolinas here Wednesday night, Thursday morning. So we'll be speeding up at that point. European predicted winds, this is the farthest east of the models, and it shows 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts possible here, even all the way down to about Sarasota and Fort Myers, and all the way up to the north of Tampa Bay, almost to the Big Bend. It also shows some stronger wind here in northeast Florida, coastal Georgia, and coastal South Carolina Wednesday night. So not just a Florida storm, but potentially a storm that impacts the Carolinas. That's the European model, and you can see the rainfall will be heaviest east of our center here. Could bring some significant drenching here to southwest Florida, to the Tampa Bay area, up to the Big Bend area on Wednesday, and then up into coastal Georgia, the low country of South Carolina, and even to the Emerald Isle area here on Thursday, but it will be out of here in time for the holiday weekend. Here's our next surge of moisture over the weekend in places that need it again: Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Western Florida, in time for next weekend. GFS farther west, you can see the strongest winds are aimed right up the Forgotten Coast. St. Mark's, Port St. Joe, 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts Wednesday morning, and then 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts possible all the way into central Georgia here on Wednesday night. Much weaker, though, for the Carolina coast. This is a rainmaker inland instead of at the coast. And here's that GFS showing that rain. We've got a front coming down Monday, so we're going to get some cooling rain finally. And then that front hangs up and the moisture from the storm overtakes it. You can see the GFS says the heaviest rain is actually over the panhandle rather than the peninsula. So just still a big divide on this. Until it forms, we're not really going to know. But you can see this one brings the heavy rain up into the mountains and then splits it into the coastal sections here on Thursday. And then Friday, it's still damp, and then the weekend dries out very nicely overall. All right, so the rest of the Atlantic, I don't see anything super threatening at this point. We may see some development here slowly here, but it's going to be a weaker system because of Franklin, too much wind shear. And then our next system likely recurves over the eastern Atlantic before Labor Day. We've got to keep an eye on the next waves coming across, but I don't think we see any immediate threats at this point. This is the next big storm here for Asia, and this is our typhoon here, Saola. I think it's Saola, and you can see it's now a major typhoon. This is Luzon. It's actually looping right along the coastline here, making a counterclockwise cyclonic loop, and speeds are likely over 120 miles per hour, and likely we'll see it getting up close to Category 5 strength and taking aim at Taiwan. There's some uncertainty, as you can imagine, but overall on the European, we see this becoming a major storm here with pressures down to as low as 940 millibars on Tuesday and as low as 935 millibars on Wednesday. And here is that direct hit on southeastern Taiwan Wednesday night into Thursday morning, and then weakening as it moves through towards China after that. That could be a very dangerous storm. The HAFS model is going to be stronger. It always is. You can see that counterclockwise loop. And on Monday, we've got pressures dropping into the 920s. It's showing 910 here on Tuesday. And then still in the 910s, super typhoon on Wednesday with landfall a little bit farther north than the European, right over central Taiwan. Very dangerous setup here with the European. And you can see it's got wind gusts that get over 95 knots here on the coast of Taiwan. That's 110 miles per hour, and potentially wind gusts as high as 170 miles per hour over the Philippine Sea. So a very dangerous setup coming here. Here's our other storm, Dam Ray, and it is a stronger tropical storm, and it is expected to recurve just east of Japan, but close enough to be a potential issue. And a recurving typhoon could affect the weather here in the U.S. in September, as we see more severe weather typically with these kind of patterns. So that was a very long video, but I'm going to actually do one on Sunday. I usually don't, but because of our threat here to Florida and our threat to Bermuda, I think it's very much warranted, and you don't want to miss that. So please consider subscribing here so that you can see that pop up in your feed here before maybe you head to church or do family things or go to work. And I thank you very much for your time today. I hope you all have a blessed day, and I give all the glory to God, who gives me the blessing to share with you all every day. I want to read a quick passage that really dwells in me, and that is Colossians 3:16. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. And whatsoever ye do in the word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by him. Later on, Colossians 3:23, and whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. But he that doeth wrong shall receive for the wrong which he hath done, and there is no respect of persons. The Lord has blessed all of us here, whether or not we choose to accept Jesus Christ as our Savior. Those who do and who do give thanks to God will be rewarded eternally with eternal life, serving the Lord. And that is what I've been called to do. And that's why I share this word with you every day, because even though I'm doing my very best to forecast, I'm doing my best to communicate critical weather information with you all, I see that as my gift given to me through God. And in the end, this is great, but what's greater is God through his son, Jesus Christ, that eternal life, that inheritance, that reward that we are serving Christ. And I want to pray for you if you are not just somebody who's serving Christ, but maybe you're struggling and that you are doing what you can for the Lord, but you feel like you have to do it for men. Paul says here to the church of Colossus that whatever you do, do it heartily to the Lord, not unto men. Do not serve other people, serve the Lord. And that is something I struggle with every day. And I just want to be transparent with you all because as much as I want to please everyone here and do my best, I realize I'm going to reach opposition. None of that's going to matter. In the end, it's accepting Jesus Christ as your Savior and living things out the way that He intended for us. And that is an amazing gift. So I hope you all have a great day. And I do look forward to sharing with you all again in the morning. Take care and God bless.